How many photos do you normally put on your scrapbook layouts? I was looking through my pages and noticed that I usually only ever use one. And that got me thinking, why is that? Especially given just how many photos I've yet to scrapbook. So many photos. That's when I decided I want to give a multi-photo layout a try. And that's my challenge for today. I'll be creating with 3 photos. That's 3 times as many as I normally would. And my goal is to incorporate them and create a page full of the details that I love. I'm not sacrificing pretty embellishments for photos. I want them both. I want the best of both worlds. Here's a look at the photos I'll be working with. The main one, this one here, is 4x4, which is a size that I'm very used to creating with. Now, because I don't usually create with this many photos, I did want to nut out a plan before I began. I knew that I would struggle with this a little bit just because I'm so used to having extra space for embellishments and titles and things. And like I just said, I didn't want to sacrifice my usual style just to get these extra photos into the layout. I was super inspired by the striped pattern paper in this collection, and I did want to add it though with some dimension. So the funnest way I found to do that is to cut the stripes out and then re-layer them onto the layout, and I will be adding some stitching here in a moment. Before I get to that, I do just want to check my photo placement. That's the plan for right now. I do want to create a cluster that sits towards the top of the page. Here's a quick look at the stitching, and I am going to add a little bit of texture by lifting up the edges of each of the stripes. This would also be a really great way to use up paper scraps if you had them, especially long skinny ones. I love that texture. The stitching just takes it to the next level. It's why I add it to so many of my layouts. And actually, while we're talking about that, I do have a video that's an ultimate guide for stitching on paper. If you'd like to stitch on your projects and you're not sure where to start, it's a great resource. I'll link it in a card here and in the description box below. I'm super happy with how this is all looking, so I am going to lock a couple of these photos into position. I'm learning so much as I go along here, and I thought, why not share the tips and tricks that I've learned along the way with you? Tip number 1 is to print your photos smaller. There is only so much real estate on your 12x12 page, so the more photos you want to include, the smaller you have to print them. I do print at home, and there are a couple of apps that I love to use with my printer. I'll leave the details for that in the description box below. I'll get to the other tips in a moment here, but first I want to talk to you about this. Yes, I was feeling brave and did decide to add a little mixed media to the background here. I am cheating a little bit because I'm using such a pale color. It is very subtle, and in fact at the end I am wishing I had extended the rays out a little bit. See how I stopped them quite short? You don't actually see a lot in the finished product, but I am still glad I added it. On to tip number 2, and that's to do with what's actually in your photos. I did find that it was best to heavily crop my photos. All of these photos originally were 4x4, so the 2 smaller ones I have trimmed quite a lot off of them. I've also been sure to overlap my photos. So the photo that's at the top right hand side there, it's actually going to overlap this main photo here like this. I really wanted to nestle the photos together, and I do kind of want to trick the eye into thinking this is one larger photo rather than 3 small ones. I do want to add an embellishment cluster on the right up the top there, so I do need every little bit of space I can get. Tip number 3 is to go with a linear design. When I was researching this project and looking at pages online, For me, the ones that seemed the least cluttered were the ones that had a very geometric and linear feel about them. I'm going to build on that idea when I'm adding all of my embellishments, including my title, and it's actually just going to be nestled in under the main photo, just like that. It's quite a large title actually, but I really was keen to use it. It's nearly 5 inches long. I've placed it though using tip number 4, and that is to overlap your embellishments on top of your photos. I do this on my regular layouts, but I did feel like this one needed a little bit more tightness. I guess that's the right word. I needed the embellishments and photos to be clustered together a little bit tighter than I would normally. A really good example of that is the chipboard piece up on the top photo there. Normally, I would position that probably 1/2 inch further to the right. See also the last D in the title, Splendid. That's quite a ways into the photo, and I did have to be a bit strategic there with that one. The bones of the page are starting to come together. I'm really loving where it's at, and I know I want to extend some embellishments down underneath the title there. First things first, I do need to do a sweep through the collection. I want to eliminate some of these supplies. I don't like a lot of choice, so I need to just narrow down what I'm going to be using. And I really love that acetate piece that says Grateful. I know that I prefer those vellum pieces flat to the background, so when it fit in between the P and the D in the title, just like that, I knew that was its home. I was also super keen to use this little camera. I like that it had the pop of black, and I felt that that tied really nicely with the black in the title and the black and white in my photos. I actually find it easier to scrapbook with less photos because I feel like when you're using more photos, you have to be more strategic with the embellishments that you're choosing. You have to do more with less, which is actually tip number 5. Obviously, you have less space to work with, and therefore you have less embellishments that you can include. So the ones that you do add need to kind of work twice as hard. You also have to be sure to include embellishments that you love, which is why I made sure to fit in a bow at the bottom there. I'm all about them bows. I am going to pare back my embellishment clusters just a little. I'm going to keep them on the simpler side of things. I am also going to be sure to work from largest to smallest embellishments. I will run out of space. There will get to a point in the layout where I can't add some things. So I want to be sure to position the biggest things first. We haven't talked about layout flow yet, and this one's a little bit unusual in that I have the stripes on the right there, and that's where everything is sort of anchored. But then I do include 3 embellishment clusters, and they do make up a visual triangle. So I did have the problem at this point where the eye wanted to travel top to bottom down those stripes, but then I was also leading it across the page to the left towards the title. The longer I created the page, the more I realized that I need to fix that. That was actually a bit of a problem for me, and I do come up with a plan, and that is to fill in the space a little bit more between the title where it says Grateful and where those stripes start. I'll do that by adding in some extra embellishments in that area. And what ends up happening is I create a very large embellishment cluster down there, and there's not that white space, there's not that empty area between the bow and the yellow stripe. I'm also going to soften the lines by adding in some of these round chipboard pieces. I'm going to be very strategic about where I place these because I want them to reinforce the flow of the page. See the rows that I've positioned under the word Grateful there? That's doing a similar thing. It's a rounder element. It's filling in that white space, and I thought it tied really well with the rows that I've got positioned under the camera on the left there. That's one of the tricks I use to create a cohesive look for my layout. I repeat icons in multiple clusters. It always works a treat, and in fact, I'm going to repeat that idea with the bumblebee B's. See, there's a B above the S in Splendid. I am actually going to add 2 more of those, and that's going to reinforce that visual triangle. Each of the clusters is going to end up with a bumblebee in it. Here you can see some close-up images. I love the stitching details. You can see the layers in the embellishment clusters. And yes, I did get an extra bow onto this page. If you enjoyed seeing the stitched details on this layout and want to recreate this look, be sure to watch this video next. It's my ultimate guide to stitching on paper, perfect for absolute beginners who want to sew on their paper craft projects. I'll see you all again very soon. Until then, bye!